The barn looked too old to survive another winter. That was the first thing Harper Vale thought when she saw it standing alone above the valley. The wood had turned gray from decades of mountain weather. Several roof panels hung loose where storms had peeled metal backward. One side leaned slightly downhill toward the old rail path cutting through the property. And yet, the structure still stood, stubbornly, like it refused to collapse simply because everyone expected it to. Harper tightened her grip on the backpack strap over her shoulder and stared at the building from the dirt road below. This was her inheritance. According to most of her family, that was supposed to be embarrassing. 3 weeks earlier, after the reading of her grandfather's will, her older cousins barely hid their amusement. She got the barn, one of them laughed. The tiny one by the tracks. Another shook his head. Your grandpa always did have a weird sense of humor. Nobody argued. Nobody defended her. Not even her mother, who only sighed quietly and said, "At least it's something." Something. That word stayed with Harper the entire drive into the mountains. Because to everyone else, the inheritance looked worthless. An isolated property. A collapsing barn. No running utilities. No nearby town. No obvious value. Meanwhile, her cousins inherited cash, land parcels, and investment accounts. Harper got the barn nobody wanted. At 19 years old, after barely holding together 2 part-time jobs and sleeping on friends' couches for nearly a year, she understood exactly how her relatives viewed her. Temporary. Unimportant. Easy to overlook. The barn fit the same category perfectly. Now she stood in front of it, while warm mountain wind moved through tall grass around the valley. The property itself stretched farther than she expected. Old rail tracks disappeared behind the barn and curved toward the mountainside. Pine forests surrounded the upper hills while a narrow creek crossed the lower edge of the land. Beautiful. Quiet. Forgotten. Harper climbed the hill carefully toward the entrance. The giant wooden doors stood partially open already. Inside, sunlight cut through gaps in the walls revealing drifting dust and old machinery shakes beneath heavy tarps. The smell hit immediately. Oil. Wood. Cold metal. Not decay. Preservation. That surprised her. Most abandoned barns smelled rotten. This one smelled maintained. She stepped inside slowly. The interior was enormous. Far larger than the outside suggested. Steel beams reinforced the ceiling overhead, while heavy industrial shelving lined both walls. Old tools hung neatly organized near workbenches. Crates sat stacked beneath tarps along the rear wall. And near the center, vehicles. Multiple vehicles hidden beneath fitted covers. Harper frowned slightly. What exactly were you doing up here, Grandpa? Her grandfather rarely talked about the barn. He only disappeared into the mountains for weeks at a time, working on projects. The family treated it like another eccentric habit. Now Harper wasn't so sure. She pulled the nearest tarp back carefully and froze immediately. A vintage sports car sat underneath, perfectly restored. Deep red paint gleamed beneath dust-covered skylight beams. The leather interior looked immaculate. This can't be real. She moved to another tarp. Another car. Then another. Classic collector vehicles hidden inside a collapsing mountain barn. Not junkyard finds. Professional restorations. Expensive ones. Her pulse quickened slightly now. This place wasn't storage. It was a hidden collection. Then she noticed the tracks. Fresh scrape marks crossed the wooden floor near the rear workbench. Recent enough that dust hadn't fully settled over them yet. Harper crouched carefully. The marks formed narrow parallel lines disappearing beneath a heavy steel cabinet bolted near the wall. That's strange. She pushed against the cabinet experimentally. Nothing. Then her eyes found the lever hidden behind stacked crates nearby. Industrial. Purpose-built. Her heartbeat picked up. No way. Harper pulled the lever slowly. Deep machinery groaned beneath the floor immediately. The steel cabinet shifted sideways several feet, revealing a hidden platform underneath. Then the platform itself began lowering into darkness. Cold air rushed upward from below, and soft industrial lights flickered to life deep underground. Harper stepped backward in disbelief. What is this place? The hidden elevator descended slowly, revealing levels beneath the barn far larger than the structure above. Concrete walls. Steel support beams. Rows of lights. Something massive hidden beneath the mountain. She stepped onto the platform carefully. The elevator carried her downward with heavy mechanical sounds echoing through the underground chamber below. And when the lower level fully appeared, Harper stopped breathing for a second. The underground facility stretched beneath the mountain like a secret industrial garage. Luxury vehicles lined polished concrete floors under soft lighting. Engineering stations filled one side of the chamber. Prototype engines sat mounted beside fabrication equipment and drafting tables. The air smelled clean, controlled, maintained, not abandoned, preserved. This is insane. She stepped off the platform slowly. Everywhere she looked, evidence of active engineering work remained frozen in place. Blueprints, testing equipment, computer systems, patent files, licensing contracts. Her confusion deepened immediately. This wasn't just a car collection. It was a development facility. Then she noticed the binders stacked neatly beside one workbench. Automotive systems, prototype licensing, royalty records. Harper opened the nearest folder carefully. Engineering diagrams filled the pages. Custom suspension systems, high-efficiency drivetrains, not in transport modifications. Then came the contracts, major manufacturers, testing partnerships, licensing agreements, and beneath all of it, current royalty payment schedules. Current, not historical. Her grandfather hadn't been hiding expensive cars beneath the barn. He had been hiding an engineering company. Quietly, successfully. Harper flipped through more files faster now. The deeper she looked, the clearer it became. The barn above was camouflaged. Everyone assumed her grandfather wasted money restoring old vehicles in isolation. Meanwhile, he retained ownership stakes in patented automotive systems licensed to manufacturers around the world. And apparently nobody in the family realized it. Then Harper found the photograph. A framed image sitting alone on the drafting table. Her grandfather stood inside the underground garage, smiling beside a prototype vehicle she didn't recognize. Below the frame, handwritten words read, "Let people underestimate what they don't understand." Harper stared slowly around the hidden chamber again. All those years the family mocked the worthless mountain barn. Meanwhile, the real inheritance sat hidden beneath it. Then she noticed the envelope, placed carefully at the center of the main work table. Her name written across the front. Harper. Her pulse pounded harder now, because suddenly, she understood. The hidden compartment wasn't the real secret. It was only the entrance to whatever her grandfather actually intended to leave her. Harper stood alone in the underground garage while the soft hum of hidden ventilation systems echoed through the chamber around her. The envelope felt heavier than paper should. Not physically, emotionally, because for the first time since the funeral, something finally made sense. Her grandfather hadn't made a mistake. Slowly, she opened the envelope. Inside sat a handwritten letter, several key cards, and a folded set of documents clipped neatly together. Her grandfather's handwriting covered the first page in dark blue ink. "If you found the lower garage, then you were curious enough to look deeper than everyone else." Harper let out a small breath through her nose. That sounds about right. She kept reading. The barn above was never the inheritance. The barn was protection. Her eyes moved slowly around the hidden chamber again. Luxury vehicles, prototype systems, engineering equipment, patent files. Nothing about this place matched the image her family had of her grandfather. The letter continued. People ignore things that look old, isolated, or inconvenient. That makes them useful places to build quietly. Harper sat down at the nearest drafting table while reading further. Her grandfather explained how he shifted from restoring collector vehicles into engineering custom drivetrain systems decades earlier. Instead of building a public company, he partnered privately with manufacturers and retained partial ownership in the technologies themselves. Quiet licensing, low visibility, long-term control. The cars hidden beneath the barn weren't trophies. They were development platforms, test systems, engineering prototypes, and the royalties tied to them were still active. Attached beneath the letter sat account summaries, current licensing contracts, ongoing payments. Harper stared at the numbers for several seconds. Not billionaire money. Better, stable money, structured money. Enough to survive without panic. Enough to build from. The next line in the letter hit hardest. "I left this to you because you always paid attention to how things worked instead of how they looked." Her throat tightened slightly. Because it was true. When she visited the barn as a child, she asked questions nobody else cared about. Why certain engines sounded different. Why her grandfather modified old suspensions. Why he kept detailed notebooks about mountain roads and weather systems. Everyone else got bored within minutes. She stayed. Apparently, he remembered that. Harper unfolded the clipped documents next. Patent registrations, prototype certifications, ownership structures, and then a complete map of the underground facility. The garage level she stood in wasn't even the full operation. A second engineering archive existed deeper inside the mountain. One of the key cards carried a handwritten label, Lower Design Vault. Her pulse quickened immediately. She followed the map through a reinforced hallway near the rear fabrication area until she reached another secured steel door built directly into the mountain rock. The keycard unlocked it with a soft mechanical click. The design vault beyond looked less like a garage and more like a private research archive. Rows of climate-controlled cabinets lined the walls. Servers hummed softly beneath low lighting. Engineering prototypes sat displayed inside glass cases. And at the center of the room, a massive scale model showing mountain transportation systems integrated with rugged terrain infrastructure. Harper stepped closer slowly. Her grandfather hadn't just been designing cars. He had been developing specialized systems for difficult terrain operations. Mountain rescue, remote transport, high-altitude infrastructure access. Several technologies inside the room were still years ahead of anything she expected from a worthless barn. Then she noticed the contracts. Government partnerships, utility companies, search and rescue operations, international licensing agreements. All tied quietly back to the hidden operation beneath the mountain property. Harper shook her head slowly in disbelief. You build all of this under a barn. And somehow nobody noticed. No, she corrected herself immediately. People noticed the barn. They just dismissed it too quickly to ask better questions. That difference changed everything. The following months became overwhelming in the most practical way possible. Attorneys, patent specialists, licensing reviews, financial verification. At first, almost nobody took her seriously. A 19-year-old inheriting a hidden automotive engineering operation beneath an isolated mountain barn sounded ridiculous. Then the documentation got reviewed. Every contract checked out. Every patent remained active. Several companies were already requesting meetings within days of the ownership transfer becoming official. Then came the buyout offers. Huge ones. Manufacturers wanted permanent ownership of the systems. Investment groups wanted controlling stakes. Collectors offered absurd amounts for the prototype vehicles alone. A year earlier, Harper probably would have accepted the first large check immediately. Because survival changes how people think. But her grandfather clearly understood that. His final note stayed taped above the main drafting table in the underground garage. Never trade ownership for temporary relief unless you absolutely must. So Harper didn't sell. Instead, she learned. Engineering first. Business second. The hidden operation still employed a small network of specialists her grandfather trusted for years. An older mechanical engineer named Victor taught Harper how the licensing structures worked. A fabrication technician walked her through the prototype systems. An accountant helped her understand how the royalty networks connected internationally. Slowly, the underground garage came alive again. Not publicly, quietly, exactly as intended. The barn above also changed. Repairs came first. Roof stabilization, structural reinforcement, updated electrical systems. But Harper intentionally preserved the exterior appearance. From the road, it still looked like an old mountain barn. That was part of the protection. Inside, though, the operation expanded carefully. Prototype development resumed. Testing platforms returned to active use. Mountain transport companies once connected to her grandfather slowly began working with the facility again. Word spread quietly through specialized industries that Vale Engineering Systems was operational again. One winter evening, nearly a year after inheriting the property, Harper stood outside the barn watching snow move across the valley below. Warm light glowed through the old wooden structure behind her. Beneath the floorboards, hidden engineering systems hummed deep inside the mountain. Her phone buzzed with another acquisition inquiry. Another corporation wanting full ownership. She silenced it immediately, then looked back toward the barn. Her family mocked the inheritance because they only saw what sat on the surface. Old wood, rust, isolation. They never bothered looking deeper. And that became the lesson Harper carried with her more than anything else. People underestimate quiet things constantly. Old buildings, hidden systems, patient work, long-term ownership. The hidden compartment beneath the barn didn't save her because it made her rich. It saved her because it gave her control over something stable, something real, something capable of building a future